So, I wanted to tell you guys a story of when I first did this 24-hour run. The same one that I'm about to do in a couple weeks and what I've been training for. When I first did it in June of last year, I had really not been training or preparing at all, to be honest. With work being what it was, I did not have time to train. I'd go and get a few miles in on a bike or jog a couple of miles here and there, but the furthest I ended up running consecutively was a half marathon. So obviously that's not a very impressive distance if your goal is to cover 24 hours. Not at all. I had ran one ultra prior, a trail run in Mississippi a few years ago, and that was my introduction into ultra running. And I really wanted to do something impressive this time, really do something good. And it was an experience. Unfortunately, also due to the Alaskan winter, there really was not a whole lot of time to run outside. I mean, obviously there's people that go out and do it. They'll get out and blast a run in -50, but I'll be honest, I'm not that guy. I have zero interest in wearing 9 different layers of clothing to then go jog. It's not fun enough to me to convince me to do that. So I did most of my work on the treadmills, and that obviously gets pretty boring and repetitive, so the amount of mileage I was adding was limited. When thaw finally came around and it wasn't violently cold outside, I would get out and get a couple miles in, but again, I only ever got in 13 miles. Work had a lot of training going on, and things just weren't adding up perfectly, or even close to optimally. But oh well, I was going to make the most of it, and I was going to drive through. So I get to this, the day prior to the race, I end up having to go on some interval run training for PT because somehow my NCO, my platoon sergeant, decided that it was imperative that I do the run with the guys, that I put out maximal effort because I'm known as a high performer and it would look bad if I did not do my best. I tried to explain that the entire platoon knew I was running 24 hours in, a day and would probably be quite understanding. He did not agree with me. He thought I was wrong and I was just being lazy. So sure enough, I had to get out and blast a bunch of sprints for 5 miles. And that, unfortunately, I did feel it the next day. I wasn't sore by any means, but I was not at 100%. I'll say that. So, come time for the run, I get there and I set everything up. I got my teeny tiny little aid station, we'll call it. It's just my assault pack laid out with goos and gels and all these other cool things and some tailwind. And I just throw it on the ground, unpack it so it's easy to access, fill up my Camelback, and we are ready to play. It's nice and warm outside. It's about 70 degrees, which I'm from Mississippi originally, so 70 is a beautiful day. But in Alaska, it's actually pretty toasty when you're used to the winter. I had never encountered mosquitoes in this state prior to this day, and they were staggering, to say the least. It was an absolute black cloud that followed you wherever you moved. It was quite troublesome. But anywho, jumped on the trail when it kicked off and took off on my way, maintaining an okay pace. I had a little bit of food prior. I had a bag of Twizzlers. I'm not sure that was the best decision, but I did it anyway. And within about 200 meters, my feet were soaked. The trail was super wet from the snow melting, and everything was muddy and super full of puddles of water. So that was already not a great start. I'm not a big fan of having wet feet anyway, so I was already just sour over this whole thing. But gunned it anyway, right? Well, within about 4 miles, my stomach is messing up. I'm getting massive GI distress. It is very obvious I have jacked something up. And then it hit me. Gosh, probably shouldn't have had all those Twizzlers, right? So, in order to avoid just shitting my pants in front of everyone, I have to cut off into the wood line and let it go. Massive case of diarrhea. Absolutely massive. Lost tons of fluids. So I get up and I kind of stagger back out to the trail like, Jesus Christ, what What have I done? I make it another mile, and I have to do it again. And this entire time, these mosquitoes are just railing me. They're just smoking my ass while I'm trying to, essentially destroy every bit of hydration that I built up throughout the day. By the time I was done, I was starting to catch heat cramps in my hamstring. Another half mile in, my obliques are starting to tighten up. Those little side stitches you get when you're running. I was starting to get those. I was starting to just feel really weak and miserable. And I ended up having to walk, I think it was 6 or 7 miles, just drinking water and taking salt capsules, trying to perk myself up and get back in the fight. So I finally get straightened out. I'm, I'm okay. I feel like I've got a second wind. I'm good to go. So I kick it back up. I'm covering 6.5, 7 minute miles for a good while. I'm feeling pretty good. I'm feeling like things are straightened out. And I don't know, man. I crossed the little aid station at some point. I was feeling pretty taxed. I was around 15-ish miles in by that point. All the cramps had gone away, thankfully, but the tightness in the muscle and the pain that it had caused from feeling the way it was and me still going, that was getting progressively worse. I was hurting pretty bad. I was starting to walk awkwardly. I was running awkwardly. And when I went to get my stuff from the aid station, I remember as I knelt on the ground and started getting molested by 1,000 mosquitoes, I looked up and there was this guy that had passed me seemingly 400 times already. He came blazing in and he got into a little tent he had set up. It was a big stand-up tent. He got inside of it and his wife or girlfriend, somebody, who knows, was making him ramen noodles. He sat on a bench. He was eating and she was massaging his legs. And he had a mosquito net up, so nothing was fucking with him. Meanwhile, I'm getting demolished while I'm trying to just shovel some tailwind into a container. And I remember that was very, very upsetting. I just looked at that guy and I was like, man, you son of a bitch. I was getting destroyed and this guy's just relaxing. So I kick it back off and keep rocking and rolling. And around mile 25 or so, we were in a bad spot. I had 3 of my toenails come off when I went to change my socks. The others had blood pooling underneath them. And all of my nails were loose. Not good. So I continue on, and I am just struggling my ass off. I am in the worst pain. Every step feels like my body is just disintegrating. My hips hurt because I've been walking fucking stupid because my hamstring is all locked up. My hamstring's locked. My calf is locked. I am just dying at this point. And I don't know how, but it seems like I managed to kick every tree root on the ground on this lap. And it was just tearing into the spot where toenails should be. So I was getting even more pain out of this. And as I would walk to try to relax a little bit and try to ease up, this absolute black cloud, this plague of mosquitoes would swarm me and just start beating my ass. So I'd have to take off again. And it was like a punishment. Every time I slowed down, I would just get destroyed. So I had to keep going. And finally, I called one of my buddies, one of my old squad members. And I asked him, I was like, dude, please bring me some food and a beer. I need something, man. And him being the wonderful man that he is, he was kind enough to oblige. So I get in the car I strip off my shoes after he gets back. I get in my car, I strip off my shoes, and I eat this food, and I down a beer. And I took a bunch of Tylenol, and I sat there thinking about the situation that I was in. And I was around mile 40 at that time. And I closed my eyes. And sweet Jesus, I woke up, I don't even know, a few hours later. I didn't even know I fell asleep, but I opened my eyes and I looked over and he was asleep. I was like, what the fuck? And I realized multiple hours had passed. I was like, Jesus Christ, man, come on. Okay, I got to get this going. I should be good now. As soon as I step out of the car, all of my muscles locked up. Like, the reality of what I'd been doing had set in on my body. It was no longer warmed up. So I just awkwardly stagger around and get my shoes on. I'm like, fuck, man. And I go and I kick it off again, you know. As I'm walking this route, there's a 6 mile loop, which is the main loop, and there's a 1 mile loop as well, all on trails. I decided, okay, while I warm up, let me just do this 1 mile and let this kind of decide how I'm gonna do, like if I'm gonna keep doing this or if I'm just gonna drop out, because I am jacked up right now. And I limped the entirety of this 1 mile. I think it took me 30 minutes to get the 1 mile in. Absolutely pathetic. You know, it was insane. And once I get done essentially low crawling back to the start/end point, they go to record me and they were about to mark me down for the 6 miles. And I was like, hey, no, I did the 1 mile, you know, just that one. And they then told me that I was not allowed to do the 1 mile, that the 1 mile is reserved for after at a certain point in the race, a certain amount of hours in. So I had broken the rules. So they told me they weren't going to count the 1 mile at all, and I needed to go and do the 6 mile loop. And I don't know, man. There's something about that. As I stood there with my nails gone and my body absolutely broken, and I mentally checked out. I was like, you know what, man, fuck this. This is nonsensical. I was like, you know what, man, I'm gonna medically drop out of this one. I'm just gonna call it a day. And I went home very defeated. I only got a total of about 40 miles, so less than my first ultra, and more so. Which again, I know I fell asleep, but total time of this was about 16 hours and 40 miles in that time. My first ultra I'd ever done in my life, I covered 40 miles in about 8 hours. So pretty substandard, we'll say, at best. I was pretty upset with that. But I tell you, between the mosquitoes and the wet terrain and everything else, it was tough to deal with. All right. So I've been putting a little more focus on it this time around. Still not much, because work has not been very fun, and a lot of stuff happened with work that sent me spiraling through an ungodly amount of stress, honestly. And then again, school and certifications and everything. I have not been training nearly as much as I should, but I do know that I should not eat a bag of Twizzlers before the run now. That is a lesson learned. And I also know what to expect on that trail, so I'm going to do my best. And I've at least been running a lot more frequently this time around than before, so it should go better. But I don't know. It's not going to be optimal, but I'm still looking forward to it. I think it'll be at least fun. I just have to do my best and try to keep my heart in check. Because like I said in the previous one, it's been being a little questionable lately, but I'm going to give it what I can, and hopefully I can gun it through that and just relax. Try to decompress after that and start recentering my focus on weightlifting and keeping my biceps somewhere above 3 inches. That's important to me. But I don't know. I thought it would be a good time to tell you guys the story of my first time doing this race, and I guess a little bit of lore as to why I am really determined to go back and do this again and do at least somewhat better. I think as far as it goes, as jacked up as I got, it was fun. I did, over the course of a week, end up losing every toenail I had, and ended up getting an infection in one of my toes that lasted for a couple days too. Better yet, I still had to go to the field with my unit the day after the race. Although I was exempted by the first sergeant and commander and everybody else, my platoon sergeant somehow fucking trumped that. Who knows how that occurs? And got me tasked out there anyway, despite all the medics saying I needed to stay back. So I went out and definitely did not make that infection go away any faster, let me tell you. So it was a lot of fun, but it's just usual Army bullshit, you know. It's what you expect at this point. I've been in for 10 years. It's nothing really shocks me at this point. I just kind of expect it. But overall, I hope you enjoyed the story. It's a fun one to recollect, as difficult as it was. But all right, I'll talk to you guys later on, eh?